Hey, welcome everyone to a review of the Sony MDRZX110 wired headphones. Now, if you want to see the written version of this review, you can find a link to my website in the video description. Now, before we start with the review of the 110, that's what I'm going to call them for the rest of this video because it's just easier. There are different versions of the 110 available, and a lot of reviews on the internet are wrong. They give you false information because they'll say, hey, the 110 has a microphone built into it. It does not. They'll mention, hey, the 110 has noise canceling. It does not. So the 110 is what I'm going to review here. If you want to see the version of the 110 with a microphone built into it, that's the 110AP. It's a slightly different model. If you want to see the 110 with noise canceling built into it, that is the 110NC. NC for noise canceling, which the NC version I will be reviewing. A link to that will be in my channel. You can look it up. This is simply just the 110 version, and with that said, we're going to dive into it. So here in Canada, it's priced at $35 according to the Sony website, but if you look around with enough retailers, you can actually get it for much cheaper at $25 Canadian, whereas in the US, it's being sold for $20. So these are purely wired headphones. They use a 3.5mm auxiliary cable, which is about 47 inches in length, and the end of the cable is at a right angle. The cable is a tangle-free design, and in my experience, it works pretty well. Surprisingly, I can unravel it rather quickly. While wearing the headphones, if you tug on the cable at any point, it does not distort the music in any way. So if you do purchase these and it starts to crackle, that's because there's probably damage in the cable. Otherwise, it works just fine. Now, when it comes to accessories, there are none. I mean, you shouldn't really expect any at that price point, but just wanted to mention it. I will be mentioning some other things that are not existent in this headphones, but simply because I want to inform you of all the details possible. So no accessories included, and the cable is hardwired into the headphones itself. Now, when it comes to how it looks, there's nothing special, but of course that's kind of expected as a price point. Nothing to complain about. They're not ugly. They're just very simple to look at. And they do come in black or white color option. Now, they're weighing a very light 120 grams, which is super light, but of course that's kind of expected at this price point. They're not the strongest around. Again, at this price point, it's not expected. I would be very cautious when putting them in a bag or just kind of being rough with them. You might crack some of the plastic or damage the body design rather easily. Now, there's expected that at this price point, right? That's okay. But there's one caveat I have, which makes no sense from Sony, and that's because the ear cups can fold in. And having ear cups that fold in on any headphones will automatically make the frame slightly weaker than it should be. This especially makes no sense with these headphones. Why? Because, well, they're not ideal for traveling, right? And they're wired headphones. So having wired headphones, take them off, it's okay. But then you have to untangle the cable, which is rather easy, but then you have to kind of fiddle with them, fix the cable. Take them off, fix the cable, and then put it back on. Take it off, fix the cable. You get the idea. It's annoying with wired headphones taking them on and off. Better to just leave them around your neck when possible. You're not fiddling with the cable and not fighting. You just put it on your head, done. The other reason for not making sense for having these foldable is because they are not ideal for traveling. Whether you're taking the bus, train, plane, whatever, do not get these if you're a very often frequent traveler. They're not going to work that well. I'll talk about noise canceling later on. I know there's no noise canceling in this, but I'll explain passive noise canceling. You do not want to get these if you travel often. It doesn't make sense why Sony did that. There's no official information from Sony if they're dust and water resistant. Well, that's probably because they're not. They're super cheap, so don't get them wet or dirty. You might damage them permanently. When it comes to replacing the ear cushions, there's no replaceable units being sold by Sony. Not expected, again, at this price point. But third-party resellers do sell them. But one thing to keep in mind, when it comes to replacement ear cushions, whether it be from third-party resellers or the ones that come with the headphones themselves, like the ones literally from Sony, they're not ideal. This is horrible material, one that will easily dissolve after wear and tear of use, especially on a daily use. And that's because the fabric is just like paper. In my opinion, it's not going to do much justice. Again, I know it's really cheap, but there are cheaper competing headphones in the same price tag bracket that sell much better ear cushions than the 110s. Now, when it comes to working out, in case you're curious, can you use these for working out? Well, yeah, but there's a couple of problems. The first is that they're wired headphones, so they're not ideal for weight training, for example. If you're going to do something like stationary bike or cycling of any kind or elliptical machine or treadmill, they'll work just fine. If you're just going to tug the cable extra slack in your pocket, you should be okay. Although I don't recommend it for two reasons. One is that they're on the ear headphones. Your ears will sweat like crazy very quickly. The other reason being, of course, is that the ear cushions are they're pathetic material. As I mentioned earlier, they'll dissolve very quickly, even more rapidly with your excessive sweating. While we're talking about the ear cushions, let's talk about how they are in terms of comfort, just simply wearing them overall. They're not bad. I can actually wear them for about 3 hours straight. My ears don't get irritated, they don't get hot, again, while not exercising, and they feel just fine. Surprisingly at this price point. And that's probably due to another reason. I mean, the ear cushions, the thickness is very thin. I mean, again, at this price point is kind of expected, but the headband flex is generous. It's not too tight. It's pretty loose, but nothing that will kind of shift around and fall around either. It's pretty well done. One thing to keep in mind for people that have little to no hair, or well, no hair at all if you're bald especially, is that there's no cushioning on the interior of the headband. Again, competing headphones in the same price point do have some cushioning. If cost of material was a concern for Sony, they could have got around this very easily by just putting some cushioning at the dead center of the headband, maybe 2-3 inches wide, because that's where your head is most likely going to rest and touch the headband. Problem solved, but this is a missed opportunity by Sony. When it comes to the headband extension, it's rather generous and it's done in notches. It's not a slider mechanism. The ear cups can shift up or down and only slightly rotate forward or back. There's minimal rotation when it comes to forward or back, which should be barely just enough for most people's head shape and comfort. It looks like Sony sacrificed on the forward and back rotation opportunity because they focus more on the foldable design. Again, a very poor choice. Now, when it comes to people on the go, maybe you're walking around campus or whatever, you want to put them around your neck. When it comes to looking left and right, it's fine. It doesn't touch my chin at all. It's very comfortable. Looking down, it will rub against my chin and my cheeks ever so slightly. Not too problematic. For those of you curious about onboard controls, what I mean is basically just a physical button somewhere in the cable to play, pause music, answer, hang up a call, whatever. There's absolutely nothing. There are no controls whatsoever. And it's very disappointing because headphones that are even cheaper than these ones from competing manufacturers will have at least a play pause button. There's absolutely nothing here. You have to get the microphone version, which is the AP version, I believe, of these headphones to get even a play pause button included. Okay, so I did mention I was going to talk about noise canceling, so we're going to dive into it now. Now, these are not the active noise canceling version, okay? Again, that's the NC version. I'll review that. A link to that will be my channel. When it comes to passive noise canceling, so because they're on the ear headphones, just simply wearing them, it doesn't block out almost any sound at all. You will hear almost all your surroundings. If I'm sitting in a room, someone else is watching TV and the TV is about 10 feet away from me, very normal volume, nothing blasting like an action movie, I can hear a lot of the dialogue while nothing's playing on the headphones. Now, when I'm playing something on the headphones and there's some slightly loud music playing in the same room as me, it's very difficult to hear what's going on in the headphones, especially if you're listening to a podcast or say news, for example. You're gonna have to crank up the volume a lot to really understand what's being said on that audio dialogue. Music, yeah, you can hear your songs, but again, if you're listening to something very vocalized like a podcast, this is not gonna be a good experience for you. In regards to battery, well, there are none. These headphones are 100% powered by the auxiliary cable being plugged in. There's no battery whatsoever. And now I'm going to talk about the microphone. I know I already mentioned it, but in case someone jumped to this chapter of the YouTube video, there's no microphone. Again, if you want to get the microphone version, you have to get the 110 AP. So the same model number, but AP at the end. That model will have the onboard microphone. This one has nothing at all. So when it comes to sound and audio quality, it's kind of what you expect at this price point. It's nothing stellar by any means. Although there are some things that kind of stood out to me. So for example, again, I've noticed this with almost every Sony headphones is that bass is punched up slightly higher compared to mids and highs. Nothing that will overbear and ruin the song for you, especially if you're not a bass enthusiast or just not looking to crank up the bass, that's okay. But there's a slightly bigger punch. If you're listening to, say, hip hop music, you will notice that. And all this is at a flat profile, by the way. Now, when it comes to mids and highs, they perform exceptionally well at this price point. Surprising, to be honest. Now, if you use a third-party equalizer and you crank up the bass, it can get very punchy, way more than I expected at this price point. I was very surprised, to be honest. If you go too high and at the same time you crank up the volume, it will get distorted. Again, this price point, that is expected. Too much bass will distort the sound. Mids and highs can get exceptionally good quality. Again, at this price point, I was really surprised. The only thing to keep in mind that I find really strange about these headphones is that for certain songs, and depending on what sound is being output, is that there's a slight reverb. It's not overbearing. It's not going to ruin the experience. Again, at this price point, there's not much to really bank on in the first place, but if you really pay attention to it, you can hear that reverb. It's strange. It's not like a flat, clean sound. There's a bit of a after feeling, if you will, and that's where the reverb comes in. Again, for certain songs and certain music, you will get used to it. Again, if you're paying a cheap price tag after about an hour listening to music, you'll come accustomed to it. but when you put them on for the first time, you might notice it's there. It's kind of odd. Now, in regards to software, there's no official software supported for these headphones, even through the Sony Headphone Connect app. So if you want to use an equalizer like I did in my testing, you got to use a third-party equalizer. So that can be on your computer or your cell phone, whatever it might be. And that's the only way you can really adjust the sound tuning to match whatever your preferences at the time. So there's a bit of a running joke I've heard amongst many people over the last several years for Sony products, not just headphones, but Sony products in general, is that Sony products are always expensive. And this is one of those rare exceptions where that's not the case. Don't get me wrong, there are some shortcomings, especially with the ear cushioning padding. It's just like paper. It's going to dissolve in no time if you use this on a daily basis. Just keep that in mind. Other than that, that's pretty much a wrap for this review. So I hope you found this video useful. If you did, be sure to check my social links and website link in the video description. Hit the like button, it does help, subscribe, and thanks for watching.